So I guess the TLDR is, should you be playing Shadowlands? Yes, definitely. The expansion feels very rewarding for hardcore players due to the new progression systems and the Great Vault, but it also doesn't punish casual players due to, again, the progression system and leveling system. The balance is a little bit off with Covenants, but that's to be expected at the beginning of a new expansion. They've already done a lot of tuning, and there will be more tuning in the coming months. The story itself is very immersive, and it's going to make you feel involved, and you're going to want to quest, and you're going to want to play, and you're going to want to be invested in your character. Overall, I think the game is in the best place it's been in a very long time, and the subscription numbers seem to reflect that. So I think it's definitely worth the money to reactivate your subscription and return to the game, or flat out start your first adventure with World of Warcraft. Yo, what is up, and welcome to the Mew Crew. I'm your host, Mucario, and today we're here to talk about the World of Warcraft expansion, Shadowlands. So a lot of my friends are seeing me jump back into World of Warcraft, and I keep getting asked, what is it that's so fun about WoW? Why are you getting so addicted to it? Like, all these kinds of questions. And I think the one thing that really stands out to me is that WoW is kind of whatever you make it. You can play casually, you can play hardcore, you can just focus on the story and play through general questing. If you're into that kind of thing, you can role play through your character. You can be one of the people that just play the auction house and try to become rich. And I think that's a really underrated part of WoW. And what Shadowlands does is takes all of those things and just improves it. For instance, with the way that the progression and leveling system has been overhauled, you can play really casually and still get fairly quick, meaningful progression through the story. However, because of those same changes, you can play hardcore and get to the end game faster and know exactly what you're aiming for and know exactly what you have to do to get there. Through the Covenant and the Renown system, if you're into role playing, this is probably a very big expansion for you because it'll change your character's story depending on which Covenant you choose. If you're into the economy and just playing the auction house, there's no better time to get into it or to become addicted to it as when a new expansion starts, because there's new regions, there's new materials to farm, mounts, all that kind of stuff. But the one thing that both new and returning players are wondering is, should you be playing Shadowlands? And hopefully this video will help you answer that question. So let's jump into it. So let's just jump into the leveling in Shadowlands. So there's a new zone for players level 0 to 10, so for new characters basically. It's a new zone that's catered to new players and or returning players, which is basically just a tutorial island. It teaches you the basic mechanics of WoW. It teaches you what combat looks like, the different kind of quests that you'll see. It teaches you dungeons and instances. It teaches you the roles that you would see in there between tanking, healing, damage. It's a very fun way to either begin a new character for the very first time or to return to the game and just get a quick little refresher. It teaches you everything in a way that doesn't make you feel bad or make you feel like you're having your hand held. It just feels very natural. And the leveling is quick. It doesn't feel sluggish at all. It's just, in my opinion, a very good addition to the game. Now, once you're past level 10, one of my personal favorite parts of this expansion is Chromie. So what Chromie is, she's an NPC from old expansions that deals with time. Basically, she's a way to let you pick your experience in Shadowlands. So you go to wherever she's located in your faction's main city, talk to her, and she will let you pick your leveling experience. So you can pick if you want to level through Mist of Pandaria, through Warlords of Draenor, whichever expansion it was that felt meaningful to you or that you enjoy those quests, you can pick to level in that expansion, and all of that content will scale with you. And it's really refreshing for people like me that make a lot of characters, because I know before it would always be, okay, I go here until level 15, then I start doing dungeons, and then once I start doing that, then I switch over to this area. And it was, if you're making 1 or 2 different characters a month, it can feel very repetitive. But this way, you can level 4 or 5 different characters and have entirely different leveling experiences, because you can play entirely different expansions. But you can also, if you're a really big fan of Mist of Pandaria or a specific one, you can just level through that, and you don't have to wait until a certain level to switch over to that content. To me, I really like it. It feels really satisfying because I can pick what I want to play. For me, that Mist, Legion, and BFA, I had a lot of fun leveling through those systems without having to get to a specific level to be able to access that content. Accessing it from the very beginning just made the whole leveling process a lot more fun for me. But aside from just the zones, leveling in general feels very meaningful. Back when I was playing in Warlords of Draenor and Mist of Pandaria, there would be a lot of levels where I'd go 2, 3, 4 levels and not get anything. And it's like, what's the point of this? What am I looking forward to? But now it feels like every level I'm getting either a new spell or a new talent or access to more dungeons. Something is happening that makes that level feel like, man, I worked for it and I got this, and it feels good. Another thing is when you actually make it to Shadowlands, one of my favorite additions is that the main story and campaign quests are easily marked. So in your quest log, there's a whole different section that says campaign, and if you're on those quests, it'll be tracked under that tab. But if you're not, like let's say you didn't meet the requirement, when you click the tab, it'll tell you, hey, if you want to continue, you have to do X, Y, and Z. Before, it used to feel bad when you take breaks or if you got lost, because you wouldn't know where to jump in or what quest was part of the main storyline without going to something like Wowhead. Here, everything is very clearly marked. The icons look different. The text is different. It's just very easy to keep track of and progress and level through the story without having to worry about getting lost. So overall, leveling alts and leveling in general just feels very good. And again, leveling alts, there's also catch-up mechanics for endgame content like renown systems. So if you are somebody like me that likes to level a lot of different characters, you don't have to feel too bad about being left behind. Because of the catch-up mechanics, you can just kind of stack up renown quests and stuff like that and just do it at your own pace and catch up to where you should be at that current point in time. Since we're talking about where you should be in that specific point of time, let's talk about the overall progression of your character. So one thing I really like about this expansion is that RNG isn't as prominent, and it's not the main difference between your gear. So you don't have to worry about getting a piece of gear but also getting the right stat rolls on it. Now, between PvP, mythic gear, raid gear, all that kind of stuff, every piece of gear has its own specific stats. The only difference is the amount of stats that you would get between the difficulties that you're doing. So a mythic 0 staff or whatever would have the same stats as a mythic 15 staff if it's the same exact one. The only difference would be the first one might give 100 of whatever stat, but the second one, because it's mythic 15, which is a higher difficulty, higher level, higher progression, all that kind of stuff, it would have maybe 200 or 150 stats. So it's the same gear but better because you did the same content but harder. So it feels really good because you can target a specific stat, a specific piece of gear, and you know exactly what you have to do to get it. You just have to get lucky on the roll, on if it drops, but not the roll itself as to what stats or how powerful that item would be, which again, I really love. Spell ability modification, so things like, spell X does more damage, or this happens when you cast spell Y. All of that comes through legendaries, which again, you can target and craft. So every legendary does a specific thing, and you know exactly what that comes from. So if it's from a specific layer of Torghast or specific world boss, you can target that and farm that, and you don't have to worry about, maybe I'm going to get a legendary, but it's not going to be something that's usable for me. It's like if I was a warlock, maybe I'll get a druid legendary, which would do nothing for me. It's always going to be the one for your class, for your spec, if you select that in your loot options and you know where it's going to be coming from. It's just a matter of if it'll actually drop, which again feels really, really good. To kind of further that point, the loot pool is smaller. So just in general, from quests, you're getting less drops. From raids and stuff, they just reduce the drops. So because of that, every time you see a purple or you get a new piece of gear, it feels very meaningful. You feel like, man, yes, now my damage is going to go up. Now my healing is going to go up. Now I'm going to be more survivable as a tank. Whatever your role is, those item upgrades, they come a lot slower, so they feel a lot better, which ties into the renown system. And the way that it works now is basically every week it unlocks new quests or a new level cap within your renown, which again makes your time progressing through that story just feel a lot more meaningful, because as you're progressing through that, you're unlocking things like new conduits, new soul binds for your renown. You're getting other things that affect you more in a general way, like I believe at like renown level 10 or something close to that, it increases the item level that you get from world boss drops, or the item level that you can upgrade your PvP gear to, the different mounts, all that kind of stuff. So because it's capped where you can only do a couple levels per week, every week you're aiming for a new goal. Okay, let me do these quests so I can unlock this new item level cap. And again, it's just, exactly what you're progressing for. But again, that's not just for PvE players. That's a big change for PvP players as well, because PvP players now, you can buy your gear from the vendor, but aside from that, you can also upgrade it. So you do get your random like crates that drops a random item every so often from Battlegrounds, but you can also purchase them directly with your honor. So you can target specific gear that way, but there's an additional NPC where you can go ahead and upgrade that gear from item level like 158 or whatever to 160 to 170. I think it goes all the way up to 223 or 232, something close to that, which is basically on par with mythic raiding gear. But the only issue is it's going to take a couple more weeks to be able to get to that cap, but at least you know that eventually you'll be able to do that. So if there's hardcore PvP players, now they don't really have to worry about going into PvE to do raids and stuff like that to have the best gear. Now, right now, that's not the case because, like I said, that item level cap, we're not there yet. But let's say come March or something like that, then yeah, everybody's kind of on a leveling playing field because they'll have the same item caps and stuff like that. So again, it just feels really good. So since we're talking about PvP, let's get a little more in depth. PvP in general feels really good right now. It's very fast-paced, it's very fun, it's very chaotic, which I personally like. You don't have to worry about these long, drawn-out 2v2 or 3v3 matches where it's like 10 minutes waiting for dampening, all that kind of stuff. It's very fast-paced. You feel like you're doing stuff because of your cooldowns, and it feels really good. There's some classes that seem a little bit overtuned or a little bit undertuned, but we can all expect classes to continue to get tuned as the expansion goes on and we see what's impactful and what's not. But overall, it's a really fun experience doing PvP right now, especially because of the gearing, like I was talking about earlier. It just feels good to know that you're not worried about getting a specific drop from a random crate or something like that. You know exactly what gear you're missing. You can target those holes and then you can upgrade those holes. There's the PvP vendors for Honor and Conquest gear, which is the rated gear. The Conquest gear, same thing. You can upgrade those using Honor. So if you get to Combatant, get your purple PvP gear, you can upgrade that to the item level. It feels like we have a very linear way to progress our character, whether we're PvE or PvP, which hasn't always been the case. And as somebody who really likes PvP, it makes me feel a lot better that I don't have to worry about doing raids or mythic dungeons to keep up with the meta of PvP. And the final thing for PvP that I don't see too many people talking about is the PvP trinket set bonus. Now it gives a 40% versatility boost, which is pretty massive. And the exciting part about that is that value just increases as the expansion go on and you get more stats. That 40%, you're just going to feel that even more. Now that we're done talking about the progression and the leveling system, let's talk about the story itself. So the core story of the campaign, in my opinion, is very interesting and it keeps you very engaged. It's very immersive. And I don't mean immersive like necessarily like you feel like you're part of the story or something like that. Like I don't think most people are going to feel like they're entering the World of Warcraft or something like that. I mean, there's going to be one of the 4 covenants that you connect with. Like even high-end players who went into this expansion expecting to pick a specific covenant due to the stat bonuses and spells that you get. For instance, Bajiro, who was a multi-rank 1 warrior, he originally went or was expecting to go Kyrian because it's just the highest DPS for warriors. However, he ended up blowing that plan up and going to Night Fae, the one that he least expected to like. And the reason he chose it was because he really loved leveling through that zone, that quest, that the spell, it really connected to him. When he was using it in the zone, it felt really powerful, really good to use. The story, like I said, it connected to him. He decided to forego DPS and go with what he felt he would enjoy more, which I feel is not a very common thing with expansions, especially new expansions for high-end players. There are a lot of people that are saying screw parsing in our damage logs and stuff like that, and I'm just going to play what I want to play, which is awesome. Like for me, the same thing. I was expecting to go in as Venthyr, and I picked Night Fae because of, well, reasons that I'm not going to spoil, but yeah, I really loved it, and I feel like everybody that goes through Shadowlands is going to have that one covenant that really just speaks to them, and that's what I mean by immersed. You're going to identify with one of the 4 covenants, and you're going to enjoy that questing, and you're going to enjoy the renown and leveling up and becoming deeper and more involved with your covenant. And I think that's just inevitable. And to be honest, I think that's fucking awesome that the content that you have to grind on a weekly basis isn't going to feel like a grind. You're going to enjoy it. And that's, yeah, I fucking love it. And I don't think there's many games or many expansions that you've been able to say that. Now, I think we've talked about every part of the expansion except for, in my opinion, the most underrated part, which is the difficulty. I don't think anybody wants to go through a new expansion and just fly through it. I don't think they want it to be a quick experience. I think you want to feel like you need to work towards something to be able to beat a specific boss or whatever the case may be. And the way you deal with that is by increasing the difficulty. And the difficulty in this expansion, in my opinion, is pretty balanced. I think there's a lot of content that is a little easier. You don't really have to worry about dying. You don't have to worry about doing groups or anything like that. But some of them, you actually have to pop your cooldowns and really have to work for it, especially when you're doing Torghast. Torghast is the piece of content which enables you to craft your legendaries. It's something you have to grind through every week to get those materials. And I think it's the only piece of content currently that doesn't have any sort of catch-up mechanic, so you're going to want to make sure that you do this every week. So basically what Torghast is you progress through a castle which has different wings, different floors, and as you progress through them, it gets harder every layer, every floor. And as you progress, you get something called anima powers to kind of scale you up as the difficulty is scaling up, which again just feels really good. It's not like everything's just getting harder and harder and harder and you eventually feel like it's going to be impossible. No, you're also getting stronger at the same time, so it feels really good. However, it feels really bad when you get bad anima powers. And what anima powers are basically spell modifications. So every class has their own different ones. So for instance, warlocks, they have ones that might reduce the cooldown for your summon abilities. They might give you different talents. So it'll say, hey, you gain this specific talent in this talent row, but if you already have it, then you can pick another one. Stuff like that that makes you feel more powerful. And as you get up there, it's really hard. In week 1, I could solo one of the wings, but I couldn't solo the second one. I had to go with my guild and ask for the help, and that was very bittersweet because the one part, it was like, man, I feel really weak, I can't do this. But at the other hand, it was like, man, this content is something that's really hard, really difficult, and I want to beat this. It made me want to keep progressing and jump back into it and solo it again, even after I had already gotten the rewards, which I did, and I did solo. Just got a little bit more lucky on the anima powers. But yeah, the mythic pluses are difficult, but they're definitely doable, because I think we even did them week 2 or week 1 whenever they were released. I think it was week 2 though. The raid seems to be very difficult. I haven't done it, but it seems to be one of the harder raids that we've seen, especially I think his name is Sludge Fist or Sledge Fist, and that hunter dude. A lot of people were saying they were slightly overtuned, but I think they got nerfed slightly this last patch, but there's gonna keep being tuned ups and stuff like that. But honestly, I feel like the game is in a very, very good spot right now with everything combined. Endgame players have plenty of content to be pushing for that isn't like a walk in the park. They're actually having to work for it. Everybody knows what gear it is that they're looking for, and due to the progression and something called the Great Vault, they can kind of target those specific pieces of gear. And the Great Vault is something I forgot to mention earlier, but it also progresses you, or it makes you feel good and rewards you for playing the game and playing different parts of the game. So I believe it gives you 3 different options per piece of content for a total of 9 pieces of gear that you can choose from at the end of the week. So for rating, it has 3 different tiers. I think it's like defeat 4 bosses, 7 bosses, and then 10 bosses. And for each one of those milestones you hit, at the end of the week, you'll be able to choose one of those pieces of gear. It will scale to the difficulty that you did for those bosses. And under that, it is dungeons. So for mythic dungeons, if you complete 0, if you complete 1, you get the first unlock. I think 4 is the second unlock, and then maybe 7 or 8 is the third unlock. I'm not 100% sure. And then the PvP, you get 1 unlock for 1,350 honor in rated battlegrounds, 1 for 2,300 or 2,500 in rated battlegrounds, and then 6,200 in rated battlegrounds. So if you're doing the cap for all of those at the end of the week, you'll get a great vault, which will give you 9 different options of gear, 3 per piece of content that will scale to the content that you were doing. So if you completed all of them, you would have 3 pieces of loot from the raid that would scale to the highest difficulty that you did to unlock that tier. If you did Mythic Dungeons, it would have 3 different options that you can get from Mythic Dungeons that would scale again to the highest keystone that you were doing for those unlocks, and then the PvP gear. You select one of them, and again, it's a way to target every hole that you have, but it also rewards you for just playing the game. And again, it just feels very satisfying. Now, I think I've touched on all of the pros and all the positives about the expansion, but there are some definite negatives. So let's go through them. So, for instance, classes aren't 100% balanced when it comes to Covenant abilities, especially. So there's certain specs that can seem kind of pigeonholed into a specific Covenant because the other abilities just feel really clunky and just unplayable just because the tuning is off. So there's times when you might have a Covenant that's good for a specific spec of a specific class, but it's not good for other specs. So for instance, Warlocks, Affliction Warlocks for Necrolord feels really bad. The spell is really clunky. It doesn't feel very powerful. I don't like to fit it into my rotation. So it just kind of feels punishing to use the ability. So I wouldn't want to pick Necrolord as an Affliction lock if I'm looking for damage. However, Necrolord is one of the best that you can pick for Demonology. So that puts me in a weird position because if I want to be swapping specs, like for instance, maybe I do Demonology when I'm solo, and then I do Affliction when I'm with a group, and then I do Destruction when I'm in PvP, something like that. It's not always the case that the Covenant is going to be or perform the same for each one of those, which kind of sucks because I don't want to be pigeonholed into a specific class and a specific spec and a specific Covenant just because that's what works, and the ability for a different spec just feels unplayable. That's probably the biggest issue that I have with the expansion. Another one is just the Maw fucking sucks. Like it doesn't make sense to me that they spend the whole campaign, the whole story telling you, hey, the Maw sucks, you don't want to go there, stay out of there, only go there. In the worst case of scenarios right now, we're only rescuing people, like once you get out, stay out. But then there's constant quests for Covenant and just story progression where you have to keep going back in there. And because of the movement and the way that works and the Eye of the Jailer, where you can only spend a certain amount of time in there and kill a certain amount of things before it literally becomes unplayable and they'll just basically instant kill you and send you out. Like it feels very slow, it feels very boring, it doesn't feel rewarding or good to be down there. It's one of my least favorite parts of the expansion, and it just doesn't make sense to me, especially because when you're down there, typically your main priority is going to be farming something called Stygia, which you get from doing the quest down there or from killing certain mobs and stuff like that. But when you die, you lose some of that Stygia. Now granted, it's not massive amounts, but to spend all that time down there, and if you have war mode on and somebody just comes and kills you, or you get mobbed on by too many monsters down there and die, to know that you've wasted whatever amount of time farming that Stygia for it to just be gone sucks. So I guess the TLDR is, should you be playing Shadowlands? Yes, definitely. The expansion feels very rewarding for hardcore players due to the new progression systems and the Great Vault, but it also doesn't punish casual players due to, again, the progression system and leveling system. The balance is a little bit off with Covenants, but that's to be expected at the beginning of a new expansion. They've already done a lot of tuning, and there will be more tuning in the coming months. The story itself is very immersive, and it's going to make you feel involved, and you're going to want to quest, and you're going to want to play, and you're going to want to be invested in your character. Overall, I think the game is in the best place it's been in a very long time, and the subscription numbers seem to reflect that. So I think it's definitely worth the money to reactivate your subscription and return to the game, or flat out start your first adventure with World of Warcraft. Alright guys, that's it for this video. It took a lot of time, but it was a lot of fun to make this. If you liked it, go ahead and hit the like. If you have any questions, any critiques, any videos that you want to see in the future, go ahead and leave those comments in the comment section below. If you want to see more of this kind of content or any PvP focused content, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because I will be posting weekly videos, probably somewhere between 2 and 4 a week, focused around PvP and the overall state of the game. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you next time. Bye!